EGX Digital and welcome to Working Together Best Practices for Cross-Discipline Development. I'm Roz Tuplin and I'm here today with Ahmed El-Badawi, Jade Leamcharaskul and Stuart Ville from Game Dev London. This panel is going to explore how developers working across different disciplines can make it easier for each other while we're working together, which is pretty pertinent right now, since most of us this year have been maybe at some point working remotely, which can make communication maybe more difficult or at least more different. So let's discuss good practice, bad practice, and maybe even get a few bugbears off our chests as well. So first of all, let's introduce our panel, and I'd like each one of you to say one thing that you wish people understood about your discipline. I'm going to start with Jade.
Hello, I'll just do a quick introduction for myself. So, hello, my name is Jade, she, her pronouns. I'm primarily a composer and sound designer, but overall I'm an audio generalist because I've worked in games, I've worked in film and animation, and now musical theatre, so I'm very general. Let's see, a personal bugbear of mine is devs, I'm looking at you. Please keep your brief very clear, and if they do change, be very clear about the changes as well. I've worked on projects where a lot of it was like half said, and then I'll go away thinking like, okay, I think I understand what I'm doing. Then I'll do the thing, and then I'll bring the work back, and they'll be like, no, this wasn't the thing. And I'll be like, but that's what you said, right? And then it becomes a whole other rabbit hole of like, oh no, we didn't mean for you to do that. We actually wanted to go in a different direction. So I think, yes, that's my top one bugbear. And I guess the second bugbear, sorry, tangent, is
go for it. You let it all out.
now that I'm thinking about it, yeah. The second bugbear is to please make sure that we figure out what you, the devs, want to do with the music that we created. So get that all done before we actually start working, and then we know, right, then at least for me, I know how much work I need to input because it is going to somewhere after the game, or whether we need to figure out any like copyright issues or legal stuff. So yeah, that's really dry and mundane, but yeah, that's my second bugbear.
Great, all right, thanks Jade. Okay, Stu, can we move on to you?
Hello everyone, my name is Stuart Ville. I am founder of my own indie game dev studio called Zap.Pow, and I am co-founder with Jade of Game Dev London. Pronouns he, him. Bugbears, things you should know about what I do. So being a founder isn't just about naming your company and creating a cool logo. There's so much more that we have to do. Business management and team management are also two separate jobs. So people tend to think that we're doing both of those things, and for the most part in a startup you do both those things and everything else, but yeah, those are two separate jobs. So if you're starting out and you're creating your own studio, just remember that you probably need to get someone else to help you.
And finally, Ahmed.
Hello, yeah, so I'm Ahmed, he, him. I work in production, specifically project management. And some of my bugbears, I say some, like I think one major, my shelf of bugbears, but one major one is basically production want to make the best game that they can alongside with you who would want someone to manage a project. The focus is just actually making sure that a game gets shipped rather than it going through development hell and pulling a Duke Nukem Forever and like it appearing 10 years later. Like, we want it to be there. We want it to be a thing. We want it to be a thing as soon as feasibly possible. We're just more impatient, basically. So yeah, that's my bugbear.
Okay, thanks everyone. So let's start with a kind of general question for the panel. Looking at the kind of positives, what synergies have you found between disciplines that kind of occur naturally, and how can we monopolize on these?
So I think synergy-wise, even before we begin making the game, I really like it when I talk to the devs and then we throw some ideas around, and then when we start referencing like, oh, we kind of want to go in the direction of this game, or we wanted to feel or have this emotional impact of this film, or some other thing, and then I go, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean, and then we all bounce around that kind of like pure synergy where we know, like say at the moment I'm kind of working on a horror game which is going to release next month. Woo. And it was like, it was so good when I was working with the developer, because we were all referencing like all these horror films and these very, very specific scenes and very, very specific details within those scenes. And then when we were just talking like, oh yeah, you know that thing where this character did this, and then they go, oh yeah, I know exactly what you mean, because I felt like really annoyed or really scared at that point. And the developer goes, yes, exactly like this. I'm just like, okay, I got you. I now know what I need to do with my work in terms of audio, because I know the direction that I need to end in. So that's like the best kind. And then that gives me all energetic to go into my audio workstation and then putting it together. And then when I deliver the product and the developer just like, yep, that works exactly right it is. I'm like, cool. So that's like one of my favorite bits.
I think some of that comes from like pre-production though, right?
Yeah.
The more details you can get on from whoever's directing the project. In some cases that's me. So like the more information I can provide, the more references I can provide, the easier it is for someone else to understand. You can have conversations with people till you're blue in the face, but if you haven't got like a point of reference, then some of that stuff that you're, especially like in general conversation, there's a lot of assumptions that go on in just when two people are talking, and that's just for the efficiency of conversation. But obviously, if you can have a visual reference point, then that kind of clears things up and certainly brings the detail in a little bit closer.
So a question perhaps for Ahmed in particular, in your kind of production role, how do you manage communicating ideas between disciplines, and how did you develop the skills to be able to do that?
It's a very good question, actually. So I think as far as like managing the communication between different disciplines, it's always going to be something that you have to adapt and learn depending on who it is in that discipline, because like people all have their personal styles of kind of conveying their ideas and how they think, and like some people are quite creative and like they have to kind of showcase diagrams and stuff, or some people are just will like spill like everything verbally, and it's just like you have to try and keep up with what's being said. And at the end of the day, you have to learn how to match your ability to kind of absorb the skills, absorb what they're saying, and kind of form it in a way that's simple and easy to understand, even if it's just like something simple like making a list, just a general like bullet point list of like a general summary, and kind of explaining that to like the next party that need to know this information. And I think one good thing would be to kind of get those disciplines acquainted with one another enough that you don't need to be there to kind of shepherd these interactions, because the more they work together, the better it's going to be. But just making sure that they're communicating enough, because it's quite easy for them to be like, oh, I've said what I need to say. It's just like, no, you need to say enough so they know kind of equal to what you know, sort of thing. So sometimes you have to be there to kind of manage that conversation. But generally you want to kind of cultivate a culture where you don't have to. And I forgot the second half of your question.
Oh, I suppose I was going to say, how did you kind of develop those skills? You know, how do you grow in that role and kind of learn to understand the needs of developers who maybe do something that you have no experience of yourself?
Yeah, I mean, it's extra pertinent because I'm actually quite new in regards to like being in the industry. But it's like these kinds of skills aren't unique to game development. Like this is something that I learned before. when like managing projects of like health products and what have you, like it's a case of like someone has an idea and it needs to get translated, and even it doesn't even need to be even a professional role. Like hell, if you say for example you're playing like a you're playing D&D, yeah, and you're the DM and you need to convey to the DM what your character wants to do in a way that kind of translates on the game world, in the game world, and in a way that the DM then makes it so it doesn't like, so he can like, they can maintain like your fun and everything, and like you can all have a good time. So it's all about kind of making sure that you're like, you have clear and concise communication and making sure that other people kind of have that too, because you don't want to be in a game where like you're having fun but the person next to you is having a horrible time because they're not able to really like say what they want to say, or like if their needs are a bit different, you like, and the DM doesn't really understand that, you need to be able to kind of step in sometimes, like there's just a person on the table, because you're all in it together. And that's the same with games, you're all in it together. Like you all, like, I hope you all want to make a really fantastic game that people enjoy and you enjoy making. And so making sure that there's that communication makes it a lot easier to kind of not have to deal with like disagreements and everything. And so, and the less that like friction there is, the easier and happier things are. So yeah.
Sure. Yeah, conflict is something that obviously you kind of want to avoid, and you want to avoid there being kind of blockages to processes, or you know, people being obstructive in any way, or I mean, not calling anyone out here, but has anyone found that there are like disciplines which have particular continual conflicts between their own discipline and that discipline? You know, not obviously intentional, but yeah, where they kind of find they're always bumping heads with this department, and how can those things be resolved? Stu, you had thoughts on that?
Yeah, so I would say from a like, because obviously I run a studio, I would say that the two types of conversation that clash the most are those doing something very practical like programming, and those doing something very creative like the art department. Bridging a gap of communication between those two people. Even for me myself, like I know I've been before I got into what I'm doing now, I was a freelance creative, so I'm very much a visual person, a visual learner. So when people come to me and they talk lots about what it is that they're doing and how they're going to do it, 9 times out of 10 I will say, can you represent that in some kind of picture format? Like and even, yeah, so like obviously programmers and people who are designing the UI, the guys in the UI know where they want the stuff, but a programmer might put it somewhere where they think is more, just from their own experience, user-friendly, or even easier just for them to program. So either trying to mediate those conversations is quite important, or even just helping them understand that those conversations between those two people is important.
I'm interested to hear, Jade, I mean, you must have kind of, with your role in music and audio, you must kind of end up working with almost everyone across the development process at some point. So what kind of challenges have you encountered, and what can music and audio people do to communicate their needs?
That's a really good question, and personally, yes, I've worked with almost everyone, or I've seen almost everyone's kind of like work, because I'm the type of composer who'll be like, oh, do you have any artwork, or do you have any like gameplay videos that I can watch? Because when I'm trying to visualize the audio, however, or how I can hear the audio basically is like, I'm very much also a visual person as well. Like if I see a lot of like greens and blues, then I try to create an audio soundscape that would either complement those color palettes or not, depending on what the direction is. And then with the gameplay videos, actually, even if they're like prototypes, they're really useful because I can see like the pacing of the gameplay and like how quickly like the scene switches, or how quick or slow a character runs, jumps, or even with the fight animations. So like those are all like really important hits that I need to consider as an audio person. So like if the game is really fast paced, then like, okay, there's like the music, but then if there's lots of impact with fighting, then the player definitely needs to hear like, okay, yes, the sword did hit the monster or whatever. So that's really important, but also it's like a secondary part of the overall experience to have the music. But the music shouldn't overpower the enemy hits, basically, because otherwise the player can't get any feedback. So all of that, and maybe possibly more, maybe there's like 10 enemies in the screen, you know? I need to like juggle all of that and try to figure out a soundscape that is malleable and flexible to accommodate for all of that. So second part of answering your question is I usually ask for things like, okay, what is like the really important bits of the audio, which is usually the sound design. So menu, UX, UI type stuff, that's really important, you know. I need to communicate to the players like, yes, you have selected and confirmed this to use a health potion or whatever. And yes, the health potion that you used was successful. So I have like a whole list of things like all of that. Then I need to figure out, okay, I need to balance all of that with all the musical stuff. So I think TLDR, like maybe like a giant spreadsheet of what is actually happening step by step. So like, you know, like character interactions, footsteps, UI, UX, monster, and whatever things that the character can interact with, and then all the environment stuff. So yeah, it's a giant spreadsheet, I think. So once
That's
I
an
have
interesting
that,
point.
yeah,
Because there are a lot of, I think there are a lot of sort of programs now and
yeah.
that you can use to sort of manage production and but as the people who then have to actually use those products, are they useful? Are some of them useful and some of them aren't? You know, I kind of wonder if the alternatives to the spreadsheet are as powerful and effective as the spreadsheet.
I personally haven't figured it out yet because I'm not like a technical audio person, so I'm very old school and work with a spreadsheet, but I'm sure there's like workarounds with that, and then it's just like just a lot of play testing afterwards to see what is annoying to hear and what is like works in balance, basically. So yeah, I can't answer that question well, sorry.
What are your thoughts on that, Ahmed, in terms of sort of project management? Do you think that there are good tools out there, or?
Yeah, so I think it's super valuable for, you know, the people on the project besides production are able to like utilize and like navigate the software and the tools that are out there well, because if people have difficulty kind of inputting like what they've been doing, what they need to do, then it becomes like that's just another unnecessary hurdle in front of like trying to manage the project as a whole. So I think it's super important for people to be able to get in, like to get the software and understand it quite easily. Though, I mean, there's not a lot of software doesn't do it well. Like, I mean, ask anyone about Jira and half the people will sweat like upon just the word. So yeah, it really does like impact the project, and I feel if like you have to get a producer just to be able to get, I mean, like it is important to kind of like get a producer to communicate what their needs are in the software for other people to use. If it's easy enough for like the other part of like non-production members of the team to use it, then that's less work for like and less money spent on the project. And so yeah, it'd be like better tools would make things easier, basically.
And have any of you ever found that you've had to change your own practices to work with other disciplines, perhaps a discipline that you'd maybe not come into contact with on your projects before, or does that ring a bell for anyone?
That's a tricky one.
Yeah.
Yeah, I think I've changed the way that I work several hundred times. I think, well, yeah, I'm constantly changing how I work, especially when you bring on new people. Like, you, in some cases, you know, artists tend to work like other artists, and programmers tend to work similar to other programmers, but everyone's got their own little quirks, everyone's got their own little ways of doing things, and everyone has their own personalities, which is like something else that you need to kind of think about when you're working with people. So yeah, you definitely need to be malleable. You need to be able to think about the people that you're working with and whether or not you're being a problem, whether or not you need to like get out of the way and make it smoother for other people.
Yeah, because sometimes you can be the blockage yourself, and it's sort of maybe hard to to recognize that you're not communicating effectively. Yeah,
definitely.
Do you think that a question for the panel, do you think that working with people from completely different disciplines can be good for your self-esteem, like particularly kind of from a creative point of view? Because it's really easy to get bogged down in your own kind of self-doubt and think, oh, I've made this thing and it's not very good. But then when you pass it on to the next person, they've never done that before, and they're like, oh my God, this is amazing, perfect, right, I can use this. So do you think that it's maybe a really positive thing for kind of recognizing your own skill?
I mean, I'll go first, but yeah, absolutely. I mean, like, it's all about getting a new perspective and getting a different perspective, because it's not like we can go like that and think differently. It's the way you think is pretty like solidly entrenched, especially once you're like you've reached adulthood and you're trying to like live life essentially. So having other people kind of give comment and critique and like support like from a different perspective, just not even something that deep, just understanding what they're saying, because it's from a different like way of thinking, you'll realize gaps in your own knowledge, because you just like you won't recognize some things. You're like, oh, okay, what is that? Oh, how did they get to that point? Oh, I see. And like you build on it, so you like the more gaps you identify in your own way of thinking, the stronger your own way of thinking gets. But at the end of the day, you're all, like there's no such thing as like the ultimate way to think. It's all a process, and like it's all, you need to constantly keep getting those different perspectives to keep working well.
Yeah, that's for sure. Like there's been quite a few times now that I think about it where like I've had to work with someone and I've listened to their point of view on something and I've gone away thinking, nah, they're wrong. And then I think about it for a little bit longer and I come back and I'm like, do you know what? I'm wrong. They're completely right. And then you come back into that situation. Hopefully you didn't leave it and burn it on fire. Hopefully like you left it quite amicable so that you can come back and just be like, look, I was wrong. You're absolutely right. Let's do it this way, or whatever the situation might be. Yeah, you definitely, again, it's just about being flexible and not being rigid yourself, really.
I mean, Stu, you've got 18 people on your team at Zappop POW, plus, you know, the work you do at GDL, and wrangling the cats that we are. So what is the role of a founder in terms of leadership of all these people and looking after these people? And how do you look after yourself as well as the kind of nerve center of the project?
I'll leave looking after yourself till later, but certainly looking after other people is not, I mean, it kind of is hard, but it's kind of not hard at the same time. Like you, as much as possible, you want to make sure that everyone's happy, and that obviously isn't always possible, but you want to make sure that you're at least listening to what their needs are and what they might want to do. See if you can provide opportunities for them. I tend to do like a lot of mentoring of people, but inside and outside of work. Like if anyone comes to me and they're like, I want to do this with my career, and I don't really know how to get there, then I will try and advise them the best I can, or I will do a little bit of homework myself, which can actually be useful for me. And in terms of, so self-care is something I'm not particularly good at. I get very excited about projects. I dive dive deep into them, and tend not to say no. So but I'm getting better. I'm getting better. You just need to, what I've started doing, actually, probably a top pro tip here, it's not a new one particularly, but if you make a list of the things that you want to do for the day, and that list needs to include a lot of stuff. Like, it can't just include what you're doing for work, although it should definitely include that. It should include things that you want to do for yourself. And then you just kind of muddle up the priorities of it, so that obviously you've got your top work priorities to make sure you get those done for the day if you can, if you manage to get the time to do those things. But make sure you're also trying to, like, take a break, spend some time with family, get outside, like, especially like at the moment during lockdown, obviously it's been a little bit trickier, but we were allowed to go outside, and just going for like a walk or a run saved my energy numerous times.
Sure,
Yeah.
completely. Yeah, I mean, let's kind of address lockdown. Obviously, this year made communication much more complicated. Do you think it's been, I mean, on the face of it, it's definitely been harder to communicate effectively across disciplines, right? It's certainly made the process sometimes a lot slower. But have there been any kind of benefits to communicating while working remotely? For example, you know, kind of filtering conversations to the kind of essentials, or things like that. Has anyone spotted any pros to this?
For me, the best thing about this forced separation, at like the benefit of lockdown, I guess you would say, is that I've ended up acquiring new people for my team that I probably wouldn't have done previously. So like, previously I would have made sure that people were coming to a physical space to have an interview, and I didn't need to do that, or well, I couldn't do that. So I ended up interviewing and speaking to a far larger range of people than I would have done, which also makes interviewing a little bit more hectic because you do interview more people. But at the same time, there's definitely some amazing people that I now work with that I probably wouldn't have been working with if I had had in my spec for those jobs, you have to attend a physical meeting.
Yeah, I've found that I you know, in my own work, I'm probably finding, if I have a problem that, you know, someone isn't necessarily immediately going to be available to answer the question, then I kind of start to think, oh, maybe actually that's a question I can answer for myself, you know, or maybe this is a problem I can solve myself. I feel like I'm asking fewer stupid questions. Not that there's any such thing, but yeah, I find a way to ask stupid questions. But I probably, you know, spend more time concentrating on my own work and going, well, actually, rather than wait for this person to answer this email or to come back on Discord or whatever, I'm just going to deal with it. But yeah, it's a kind of strange circumstance, isn't it? You know, it does create some problems for workflow. I mean, Ahmed, have you found that it's been particularly difficult to do your job in these circumstances?
Like, I've only really been working in the industry as long as like lockdown has been a thing. So I've only I've only now been working under lockdown. And so yeah, I mean, of course I've worked before, but I'm still kind of learning about like what the impact lockdown has had on like my work and like how it could have been. But at the end of the day, it's all hypothetical. But I found, like, for example, having like not really met anyone, like, it's like you don't fear, oh yeah, like I might, but it's two things. Sometimes you feel like, okay, like I need to ask this work thing, I'll like get it done. But sometimes you're worried that, oh, like, how do I approach this person? I don't know the cues or how they react, or how, like, what is a good way to like approach. So I think it's very much something that I'm still figuring out. But yeah, like,
Sure, you're doing great.
Yeah, I like to think so.
Yeah,
No,
I think you're really right that there isn't that same. You can kind of set the standards for your own management because that it is what it is, and people people aren't bringing their kind of their kind of personal stuff maybe so much, or they're just kind of recognizing that you have a message to deliver and that's it. I'm interested to know, kind of to wrap up, what other disciplines that aren't your discipline are kind of fascinating to you. So, is there a particular discipline where you're like, I'd love to get into the head of somebody who does that job? Jade, does anything spring to mind?
Oh my goodness, everything that is not maybe like audio related. I mean, like, I don't think I can really answer that question, but really, like, I think everything, just because audio is like a creative thing, but it's also a really weird thing where you can't, like, if you hear something, you'll be like, yeah, that works, but it's so difficult to articulate why or how, especially if you're talking to someone like without any kind of musical or audio technical vocabulary or knowledge, and then just like, so like I can say like, oh yeah, that sounds really blue, and just like, what the hell does that mean? Right? But I think in terms of getting into the headspace of someone else, I think any kind of headspace that is not audio related will be really, really interesting, because I always see something at like through an audio lens. So if I talk to a UI or UX person, that will be really cool, because it's like, oh yeah, we're pretty much doing the same thing, but we're just like menus and buttons and like creating the experience just through that, and just like, but that is so technical in itself, and it's not just like as openly creative in a way of just like, oh yeah, I'm just gonna like do concept art and that's just like anything, and like there is a story there. But for like, say like UI, that's like that there is a story, it's just very, very in a very, very structured way, basically. So maybe UI, I don't know, but then programming is also interesting because I have no idea how that works at all. Everything.
Okay, we've got one bit for everything / UI UX. Who fascinates you?
I tend to think that programmers are the people that fascinate me, but at the same time, when I look at what they do, it like just looking at it gives me a headache, and I'm like, there's no way. Even at the beginning of my like journey into game development, I tried to do programming, although mostly through logic bricks, which is potentially a curse word for programmers out there. But like, and even that, I got it wrong at certain points, and then I got as far as I could get with logic bricks before I started talking to people about the problems that I was having, and they were like, yeah, well, if you just know a little bit of code, you could fix that. And I was like, oh, I can't even begin to. I'm such a visual person. You can ask me to draw anything you want. You can ask me to model anything you want. You can ask me to paint anything you want. You can ask me to build stuff physically, like statue structures, whatever. Fine. Code, nah.
Wow.
Just no.
I'm going to hold you to that. I'm going to ask you to build me a statue.
I used to do set design for theatres, so.
Oh wow! Okay.
I can build stuff.
Okay. Roz Tuplin statue commissioned. There we go. So Ahmed, who interests you? Whose mind would you like to leap inside?
Okay, so I can't really top Jay's answer, which is basically everyone. Where like designers, like I don't even really understand like how they manage to get like the future vision of the game down, and how they like how do you even begin? Because like how do you figure out what people want to play, and like what do you think is fun? Like I struggle with that every day. It's just like, what is fun? And I'm just like ponderously staring to the distance and fall asleep or something. But then there's like artists who like figure out like a look that matches that design, and kind of fish out kind of what would be good with the design of the game, and then there's code who literally know like languages that aren't even bound to the realm of words, and it's just like maths magic. And but even though like I studied maths, I did it quite like extensively at A level, and I can kind of get where they're coming from, but then I look at code and I cry tears of blood. And so it's just like, so like there's, and like as like audio as well, like man, like I think in year 9 I kind of learned like how to like play instruments, and that didn't really work out. And I've always like that's always been like a dream at like at some point in my life, but to be able to kind of get like the feel like a completely separate sensory, like as opposed to like the like art, which is visual, the auditory feel of a game is huge. I mean, like most people like go out their way to listen to like soundtracks and everything, and like one of the big takeaways from games and like visual, like these interactive experiences, is the audio. It's what they can keep and like after the experience and to relive it. So all of it. Like all the people, I want to be in all their brains, basically.
In conclusion, we think everyone is amazing.
Yeah.
Great. Well, I think that's great, and I think thanks to everyone. This panel's been really fascinating. So thank you so much to everyone. Thank you for watching, and thanks to EGX Digital. You can find out a bit more about Game Dev London at www.gamedev.london. That's right, isn't it, Stu?
That's correct.
Got that right? Yeah. And follow us at Game Dev London on Twitter. And we have lots of videos on YouTube, on Twitch. We have all kinds of information about game development. And thank you so much.
Thank you. Bye-bye.
Bye.
Bye.